Hello, welcome to Gardener's World. Quinces are just about the most exotic fruit that I grow here at Longmeadow, and there is something magical about it. And their scent, their fragrance, is both fruity and perfumed. And it also tastes really good. You can't eat them raw, of course. Quinces, when ready to be picked, are rock hard, and you need to cook them. This is a variety called Vranja, and I will gather them all and store them, and they will store for months if kept nice and cool and slightly humid. Coming up on today's show, as winter approaches, Arit shows us how to hold on to some colour in our garden.
At this time of year, you can be creative and put a real oomph into the garden, giving it the lift it needs from autumn all the way through into spring.
We meet a gardener who extracts a stunning array of dyes from her plants.
As it hits the air, it's gone from the green to this vibrant turquoise. It's like magic.
And I shall be giving a masterclass on weeds. Right. This will come into use in a little while. But I'm now going to line the base for the water feature at the centre of my paradise garden. A couple of weeks ago, I had a visit from Mark Gregory. Now, Mark Gregory won the People's Choice Award for his Yorkshire garden that he designed, and he has made countless gold medal gardens at Chelsea. And what he advised me to do was to build a reservoir with a pump inside it, a mains water supply, and then put a grid over the top of that. And on top of that, you could have a fountain, you could have a basin, anything you wanted. I have dug out a pit. And the first thing to do is to line the hole with butyl. Now, butyl is a rubberized material, which is by far and away the best thing to use for a pond. If I put the butyl straight onto the soil, there's a risk that stones could puncture it. So the first layer will be a soft underlayer. Even so, I still want to just get rid of anything that could pierce that lining. So take off all the loose material. Now this is pond underlay, and the beauty of it is it's strong. So it acts as a good protective layer, even though it's thin. As a rule of thumb, when you're measuring a liner, be it to protect the butyl or the butyl itself, far better to have too much excess than not quite enough. Next, a thick butyl liner. What I'm trying to do is get the liner down in against the sides. Slightly awkward on my own. I wish I'd got someone to help me, actually. Where's Carol Klein when you need her? So the next stage is to cover the butyl with another layer of protective underlay, even though it's going to be overlay. So the butyl is sandwiched between two protective layers. What is it, Nelly? Oh, are you coming to help me? Thank you. Okay, so next step is to knock up some concrete. And I haven't done this for a fair few years. The concrete mix in the wheelbarrow is 5 parts aggregate to 1 part cement and will form the foundation of the water tank. What I'm going to do is leave a couple of bricks in and use those as a level to measure the concrete off. Well, you can see that there's going to be quite a bit more to do, but I'll keep plugging away at it. Now, there's a real feeling that even though today is sunny and I can tell you very warm, that winter is around the corner. But Arit has got lots of inspiration for containers that will look fantastic throughout autumn and through the winter.
The first container that I'm going to plant up is everything autumnal, reminding us of Halloween that's coming and all those wonderful autumnal fires that we're going to be cozying up to. The exciting part of buying our plants, as we all know, that's the easy bit. It's the containers that we have to also put some planning into as well. Now, I personally enjoy using grey. I think it really shows off foliage, but also with the planting can also be given quite a contemporary twist as well. This is quite a deep container, so I'm filling it with plastic pots, making use of that plastic. It will fill out the bulk and it'll be quite light once I've poured the soil on top of it. I've added in some horticultural grit. That's just to help with drainage. I prefer to use a peat-free compost. And the first plant I want to go for is this beautiful Phormium. This is going to be my focal plant, and I actually want this to sit at what will be the back of the planter. And all of the plants have been given a nice soak beforehand, just teasing out a couple of the roots, which is looking fantastic. The next plant I think I'm going to go for is the Rebecca. And what I love about this is the fact that the heads here are going to match the colour of the Phormium. And I like the way how the leaves are just making a connection to the container. My next choice I think I'm going to go for is the Leucanthemum. Now, you'll see that I have been choosing perennials. There is an intention that they would go into the border in the springtime because they wouldn't be able to live their full life in the containers as they are now. And I've chosen these because all of these buds are going to give me flowers going on through the coming weeks, and you can see now that white really starting to pop and lift the planter. The next plant I'm going to go for is this bronze sedge, which is fabulous. So I want this one to go in to add movement, and also there's beautiful little bronze tips on these leaves that are just picking out again the highlights of the Rebecca and the Phormium. So the Ajuga now comes in here, and what I really love about this is that you've got that contrast of leaf shape. This is Physalis, which is also known as Chinese lantern, and just gives this wonderful autumn colour. There are some little planting spaces in there, so what better than to place in some bulbs. That's going to give in some fantastic spring zing. This is Ballerina, a beautiful orange tulip, so I'm going to pop these in between the spaces before I backfill. I think that's going to really add a punch of autumn colour all the way through to spring. One of the areas of a garden that can get overlooked for containers is a shady spot, but it's lovely to glance to a dark corner and see plants nestled there in the autumn light. Centre stage in this container is the Tricertis. It's an exotic but contemporary plant, and I love its gorgeous orchid-type flower that will keep going right through the autumn. The silvery variegated leaf of the Brunnera will always shine out from a shaded corner. I think a real must-have. Muhlenbeckia is an evergreen trailing plant, which I feel is more contemporary than ivy, with its black stem and glossy leaf. Trailing plants really help soften container edges. And finally, I've used one of my favourites, Hackernacloa macra, for its vibrant limey colour, which beautifully complements all of the purple hues of the other plants. There's still going to be so much wildlife in the garden through autumn and into winter, and I wanted to make sure that this container would be able to support the insect life, the birds, all the way through, as well as obviously still giving lots of visual interest. So this miscanthus will be something that will be really great for the birds. They tease out the leaves and can use that in their nests. And the little aster at the back here is great for late season nectar. That very open flower really makes it easy for bees to be able to access. Now, sedums, they are a must in a container. They are so great for hoverflies. Bees love them too. And what's also fabulous about them is that come the winter time, their seed head remains in shape and it always gives structure within this container. I have just added in a few little pine cones so that when the insects do come to visit this container, they've got somewhere to be able to rest as well. From a design perspective, I wanted the miscanthus to be centre stage, and what I call my froth, they're framing the front of the container to give interest, and also this lovely palette of colours is really sitting well together. And at this time of year, you can be creative and put a real oomph into the garden, giving it the lift it needs from autumn all the way through into spring.
It's good that people are considering their gardens as having a life in winter. And certainly here at Longmeadow, we've really tried hard to make the garden look good in winter and also look different. Now, I've got 6 barrow loads of concrete in there, levelled it off. It's not perfect, but it's certainly perfectly good enough to form the base upon which to build the concrete block tank that will hold the water. But I will leave it for at least 48 hours to go off properly. Okay, that's a bit of building. Let's go back to some gardening. I was going to say it has been a good year for fruit. It is a good year for fruit. And of course now is peak apple time, a little bit earlier than normal. I reckon apples are at their very best around about October the 10th. Well, 10 days early is about consistent with everything else this year. But sometimes it's difficult to know when an apple is ready. As a rule of thumb, if windfalls are starting to fall, that's a good sign. But the best way to test is if you take an apple like this one. This is a step-over apple called, rather unglamorously, scrumptious. And if you just take it in your hand and just twist and lift gently, that's ready to pick. You haven't had to pull at it, you haven't had to yank, you just lift and twist and it's ready for picking. So in fact, what that means is the rest are likely to be ready too. When you have apples on a step-over or a spallier or a cordon, it's not too bad. But when you've got a large tree like we have here in the orchard, there are thousands of apples. And you can see we've had a windy night last night. Look at this number of windfalls. And it's a real shame because this apple is called Ribston Pippin. It's a beauty. It's delicious eating apple. But once they fall to the ground, you can't store them. You can eat them, and they're perfectly edible, but the bruise of hitting the ground means they won't store for more than, well, certainly weeks and sometimes just days. That leaves the problem of what on earth you do with windfalls. Now, you can juice these. The problem with making your own juice is that it's not pasteurized, so you need to either consume it fairly quickly, within days, if you keep it in a fridge, or else freeze it quickly. Now, what we discovered is there are quite a lot of local people who will bottle for you, and they will juice them for us, pasteurize them, bottle them, and return them for a price. Now, that seems to me a very reasonable and sensible way of using up your spare apples. But you need to gather them up, and I found a good way of doing that. I got this from a farm shop. I think it's used for mucking out horses, but it's really good for collecting up apples. Because it's rubber, it doesn't damage the apple. Now, the reason why we have so many apples this year is not because of the hot summer. It's because of the spring we had. If you remember, spring was actually quite cold in March and the beginning of April. So there was very little blossom. It was late. And then suddenly the weather broke, and we had a glorious late April, early May. All the blossom came out, therefore they cross-pollinated. There were masses of insects around, no late frosts, and so all that blossom set fruit. But eating an apple that you have seen blossom and then slowly develop through summer until it ripens to that perfect point in autumn is one of the highlights of the gardening year for me. Now, growing your own fruit and veg is something that Frances has been doing all year on her shared allotment, and we pay our last visit as she prepares to show her produce at the local show.
It's been over 8 months since Luke and I started on our allotment journey.
There's been such a huge transformation of this plot over the year. To think that back in March it was just a big mess of muddy clay, and now it's really productive and full of healthy fruit and vegetables. And what better way to celebrate all of our hard work than a good old produce show.
Every year, this allotment community gets together to show off the best, the biggest, and the downright ugliest. With 15 categories up for grabs, it's all to play for. Last month, we decided to enter our very own plum jam into the competition. But will it win us a prize? There are a few familiar faces that have entered the competition too. And it seems we may have a bit of a rival for our jam.
Are you entering anything, Chicken?
I've got a few things. Jam, contender.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, I've got eggs.
You've got eggs,
a tray
of
of
course.
eggs. And I'm just waiting for everyone else to bring all their heaviest stuff down.
So you can work out which one to bring?
So and then I'm going to run up and go and take a fresh pumpkin, hopefully.
I never knew you were so competitive.
There you go, you've got it.
With our produce being put through its paces, we decided to compete in 5 categories. Each one has a chance to win, and it's only a matter of time until we see the results. As more people start to arrive, I catch up with fellow allotmenteers to see how their growing year's been, and if they think they're in with a shot of a prize.
Yeah. Wow. So this is an entire plot's worth of just pumpkins. I think. Well, actually, this isn't.
This is. Wow.
This is.
Rachel, that is amazing.
It's nice, isn't it?
How do you grow something that big?
Ask chicken. Ask chicken. Stick it in the ground and hope for the best.
It looks like you've got an amazing basket of food going on.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't expect I'm gonna win, but anything, but
You never know.
I just bring,
And you've got callaloo. Are you entering that bunch of callaloo?
yeah.
There you go. Good luck, Barry.
Okay.
Behind the scenes at any produce show is a set of judges waiting in the wings to judge the best from the rest. And this year they've invited me to join them. But don't worry, it won't be rigged. I am keeping well away from any of the categories that we're in.
I'm teaming up with judges Jess Kindwood and Tim Foster.
I think my personal favourite. Look at that. It's weird and rude.
Yes. Isn't up to lavender, herbs,
Look at that.
fruit,
Berries.
and it's beautiful quality produce.
It is good quality. First prize goes to number 27.
So best bunch of callaloo, but I think this one has to win because there's so much of it.
B's down as first prize.
First prize.
Okay.
And I think the number 30.
Are we going to go for number 30 as well?
So.
Okie dokes. Yeah, so
that's heavier. Okay, so let's do these then.
Oh, yeah.
That's it. That's the winner.
We have a winner.
With judging duties completed, the organisers start to tot up the results. And Luke and I decide to head back to the plot to have a catch-up on what we've achieved this year.
So, a year has gone by.
I know, so quickly.
Yeah, so fast, isn't it? The difference from what it was is incredible.
Yeah, it's been so easy to kind of focus on one bit and be like, oh, I need to get that bit, I need to get that bit. But like, it's nice to kind of sit back and go, actually, it's not just a pile of mud anymore. We've got an actual allotment plot.
That's it.
Big revelation for me has actually been kind of flowers on the plot. I think I was so kind of like veg, fruit. And actually, in those bits where you've just got things coming up or the slugs have eaten everything, the flowers have really been one of the things that have like made my heart sing.
Being able to grow things for yourself is something I have always aspired to do. And so I'm really grateful that you've kind of shared this with me and allowed me to grow things for myself, because there is nothing like it, is there, homegrown produce?
No, it's been great, and thank you.
Oh, I'll be back.
Brilliant. No, getting rid of you now.
Should we go and see how we did?
Let's do it.
Cool.
I think we got one first and a couple of highly commended.
One heavy squash.
We've got the heaviest squash.
Well, that's good.
No, we've got two firsts then. We've got two firsts. The jam category was a heavyweight title.
Well,
it was fiercely fought. We didn't really...
It might take a part, isn't it, really, so.
Well, you would say that.
I don't think as many people actually produce their jam on their allotment like you two guys did.
Well,
I'll give you that.
You got extra points for effort, I think, definitely.
How did you do?
First prize on the most unusual vegetable.
This was yours, was it? What is this?
So it's a cucumber from Sikkim in Nepal.
Amazing.
And we won Best Bunch of Callaloo, which is like a Jamaican kind of West Indian green.
Oh, well, congratulations, that's ace.
Thank you.
Well done.
Cheers.
First.
It was the creativity that swung it for you, you know. No, well done, you should be proud. And your bees should be very proud as well.
I will go and tell them individually.
Absolutely.
Very much.
Hey, how you doing?
Yeah, good. How did you do?
We got a highly commended on the old Cheval Vert, you know?
Your horseradish concoction.
Yeah. What's really inspiring is seeing all this stuff and being like...
And the lovely people that have grown it, you know?
Yeah, it's really nice hearing their stories and kind of where they've come from doing it.
Yeah, definitely.
Been good. I reckon there's some seed swapping to be gone over the autumn.
I'm already
next
on
year.
it.
Yeah.
I've got loads of seeds. What have you been doing?
Wasting my time, obviously.
Today has been such a great day and a fitting end to a lovely year here on the allotment.
As you can see behind me, this is such a fantastic community, and they've really welcomed Luke and I with open arms. And that's really what allotments are all about. They're the communities, learning from each other, growing with each other, and it's been such a privilege to be a part of that this year.
There is no doubt in my mind that growing your own fruit and veg and eating it with family and friends is the best culinary experience you can ever have. But having said all that, it doesn't matter how long you've been doing this, and I've been growing vegetables for over 55 years, you can guarantee at any one time something will be going wrong. This is Florence fennel, and you grow it for a nice, big, fleshy bulb at the base of the plant, fantastic in salads, very good poached. But if you look more closely, an awful lot of them have got a flowering stem, and some of them are even producing flowers right now. And if you pull that up, you can see that that flowering stem is really woody and hard, and there's not much else on it. However, if you've got some base to them, keep them, eat them. So, for example, that, I'll never get a really big bulb from it, but that'll be good to eat. If you're growing chicory, and in particular radicchio, what you're after is a really bright crimson vegetable. You can either have a round ball chicory or like these Rosa de Treviso, which are tall. Anything that is green will be bitter. Now you can see this is all mainly green, but it is beginning to turn red, and that's a result of the weather getting colder. And what you need to do is remove the green foliage as it starts to fall. And that will allow better air circulation, because there is a risk, if it gets really damp, that these can get soggy and rot. And by November, I like to have all the green leaves removed, so all you're left with are the red radicchio themselves, which you can harvest right through winter and will regrow, and very often you can get 3 cuttings from each root. Now, I've no idea whether the intense red of radicchio would translate into red dye, because vegetable dyes don't always come true, as we found out when we visited Christine Lewis at her home in Welford in Northamptonshire.
I enjoy dyeing textiles with plants because it's always a surprise. You never know what you're going to get from a plant. The colours that you see in a plant are not necessarily the colour that you're going to get on the fabric. And it's just a privilege to work with nature's beautiful palette. Back in 2012, I read an article in a magazine about how you could turn food waste and plants into colours for textiles. I was intrigued because actually I have formal training as a chef, and the two just seemed to go together. So off I went. I started to create my first dyes. We built the shed studio. Then it seemed only natural then to create my own dye garden. You have to be prepared to accept what nature gives you. So I work with the seasons. Here we've got examples of the plants that I use for dyeing, and they illustrate perfectly the changes that the seasons bring to the dye pot. This is dyed with nettles. This lighter shade here was one of the first dyes of the spring. As we go through, you can see that they're getting darker and darker. The colour I'm getting is certainly darker this year than it has been in previous years, with the drought affecting the way the plants grow. Plants are stressed, and that is evident in the results in the dye pot. So today, it's a really good day because it's nice and warm to be harvesting the indigo. I'm not creating a fermented indigo vat that you would expect your indigo genes to be dyed with, for instance. This is quite a unique colour, and it's called fresh leaf indigo. And I understand that these can actually be regrown. If you pop them in water, they'll regenerate, so you can plant them again if you'd start it early in the season. So there we are. You can actually see some of the blue coming out on these already. So hopefully it'll be a good strong dye. This is a great example of seasonal dyeing. It's got a small window opportunity from about July through to September. So it's one to look forward to in your dyeing year, as it were. It's rather like making pesto. Okay, so that's done. So now it's time to add the fabric. So we pop it in. It doesn't stain your hands too badly, not this one. The longer you leave it, the deeper the tone of colour you'll get. Right, I think that's ready now. So we just gently squeeze it so we don't lose any of our precious dye. And then, to release the blue, we plunge it into cold water. It's changing now, even in the water. And as I lift it out, it's gone from the green to this vibrant turquoise. And as it hits the air, it will continue to develop for about 30 to 40 minutes. It's like magic. People often ask me how I make the dye stick. Well, we use something called mordants, which just means to bite. My most used mordant is actually soy milk made from soybeans. It makes the dye particles adhere to the threads in the fabric. In the middle of the winter, I'd be drawing on barks. And then as we move into the spring, we get first nettles appearing, which are fabulous. I'll be sowing seeds and then the marigolds will come. As we go into autumn, I'll be using more of the hedgerow brambles and acorns. So it's a constantly evolving year for me. My favourite colours from dye plants are pinks and golds. I had a real surprise when just popping some dahlias into a dye pot. I got a fantastic gold. And I didn't grow them with the intention of dyeing. I grew them just for cutting. But one day I got a lot of heads that had dropped off this polka variety. So now I'm growing them, you know, in abundance really. These will be dried, I can keep them, and the colour variation isn't too great between fresh and dried, so that's wonderful. The other colour I like is the pinks and the corals through to reds that you can get from madder. So it looks quite insignificant, but the colour all lies beneath. We grow madder for the roots. It's a labour of love really, because once you've sown it, it takes at least 3 to 4 years for the roots to mature enough for you to be able to get any dye colour from them. It's quite a juvenile plant really, but look, the roots are coming on. You very, very gently simmer it and you'll get the beautiful, beautiful shades. It's right into scarlet reds. For anybody wishing to start out, just keep it really simple. Get a mixture of annuals, perennials and shrubs, because you'll be able to draw on things throughout the season. And remember, you don't have to have a big space. You can grow things in pots on the patio or even on a kitchen windowsill. When I look back on everything I've done with natural dyes, I can't believe the journey has been so rewarding. To know that I've actually grown the flower that's coloured the textile gives me such a good feeling. And it's just so lovely to be able to talk to other people about it and hopefully inspire them as well.
I love the delicacy of those colours. They're completely fascinating, and also the way that they change as the weather affects plants and the colours that they result in. And then there's the magic of the transformation from that green to blue on top. It's just a joy. Now, talking about the way that weather affects things, come and have a look at this. These are the flowers of Galtonia, rising up like sort of giant white bluebells. And I planted those in April, expecting them to flower in August, even early August, and there was nothing. And the reason why they're flowering so late is because it's been so dry. So in a year when most things are 10 days to 2 weeks earlier, these are at least 2 to 3 weeks late. Still to come on today's show. After the blazing summer we've had, Adam goes back to RHS Wisley to see how their new borders have fared.
Wow. We've been feeling it.
It's time for a bit of redistribution. These were tiny little seedlings of Persicaria virginiana. And when I took them, the parent plant was quite interesting foliage with this sort of lime green and coffee-coloured chocolate splodges on it. Perfectly interesting, but not very dramatic. But now that we come to late summer and autumn, it hits its stride with a glorious tread, because they have these long, delicate stems highlighted and pinpricked with tiny little coral, pinky red coloured flowers. It's absolutely beautiful, and I love it. And these were seedlings that were just scattered around the parent plant. I potted them up in spring, and now they're ready to plant out. And you can see that they're a good size. This is about a third the size of the parent plant, and next year I'm sure it'll be performing really well. So I'm going to add them in amongst these borders, which are semi-shaded. And this is a plant that does its best in light shade. It doesn't like the glare of full sun. There's a mass of forget-me-not seedlings, a myosotis, which I can just plant through. What I'm looking for it to do is to fill the area under the branches of this rose, which is called Charlotte Glut, and has particularly good hips. It also has vicious thorns, so I need to be careful. You moaning in the background, what is it? What? Oh, I see, I see, I see. Would you like me to plant this one? Look, I've got it here. Look at that. Right. Finished? Happy? Stolen the show? Okay, we can continue. So that's one in. Although this will self-seed, it's not invasive in any way. The seeds fall around the plant, and there's a certain amount of self-selection, and it gradually spreads that way. Now, they're members of the Polygonaceae family, and I like growing them, and if you've got space, you can really make a big impact. But there is one member of the family, Fallopia, which comes from Japan. It was introduced as a border plant and has become the worst weed that this country has ever had to deal with. I'm talking, of course, of Japanese knotweed. And Nick has been to find out what on earth we can do about it.
Japanese knotweed, or Fallopia japonica. It's Britain's most aggressive, destructive and invasive plant. For those poor souls that are affected by it, it can feel like an inescapable, unceasing nightmare. If it's set free, it can be incredibly damaging to native flora, suppressing and preventing its growth, but it can also cause huge damage to houses and to roads. But for those lucky, unafflicted viewers, don't switch off. It's estimated that knotweed costs Great Britain around £165 million every year. And it's been confirmed at thousands of locations in all corners of the UK. Unfortunately, these days, you're never far away from knotweed. Like many invasive species, Japanese knotweed was introduced to the UK as an ornamental plant over 200 years ago. And at first sight, it's easy to see it's a fairly attractive plant. It's got these bamboo-like canes with a speckling on the stem, heart-shaped leaves, and then these white plumes of flower which appear in late summer and autumn. But little did the Victorians know the curse that they were unleashing on the UK. The plant soon escaped from gardens, made its way down watercourses, and has now spread all the way across the United Kingdom. South Wales has some of the worst affected areas in the country. Here in Cardiff, it's an ongoing battle to stop the spread. One chap who knows all about that is Iestyn Jones, an expert in Japanese knotweed removal. Iestyn, I think people are aware that knotweed is a huge problem in the UK, but what are its primary means of spreading?
It's mainly through the rhizome system.
How far will they spread from an individual plant?
Up to 7 metres.
Wow.
Well, it depends on how established the plant is.
How much of a problem is it here in Wales?
So it's mainly where there's people, because it is predominantly people that spread the Japanese knotweed. There's a lot of dumping of contaminated soil, which contains the rhizome. They're spreading it through trying the DIY method of getting rid of it.
If people try to dig it up, for example, what's the risk if they do that?
There's a risk that they're going to compound matters and make things worse.
Okay, so that means that bits of chopped up rhizome can then regenerate potentially?
That's correct, yeah. There's always the chance you can make matters worse.
And what's your particular approach to managing Japanese knotweed?
I use a systemic herbicide that goes right into the roots in order to kill the rhizomes and the plant itself. And I use this from between 3 and 5 years, and that's followed by a monitoring phase. So on year 1, we spray the herbicide during the growing season, and then return then for the following year, and we'd be hoping for about 25% regrowth or less. And then to spray then when it's between 60 centimetres and 1 metre high.
So it's year 2?
Year 2, yes. And just to keep on going, really. As a rule of thumb, we need to have 2 years of no regrowth in order for us to issue that certificate of remediation.
And so it's remediation rather than eradication? You don't say that it's absolutely gone?
No, because technically you've still got the rhizome system still there on the property.
Okay.
So I can't technically say it's been eradicated.
Long-term chemical treatments are one of the most common and effective, but there are other methods being used to get this thug under control. The best advice is to bring in a professional company that can deal with it for you. However, if you know what you're doing, there's a few things you can do to weaken and knock the plant back. So one of the first is to remove the stems. But one of the key things is what you do with those stems. You need to allow them to dry down completely. And once they get to this sort of state, then you can burn them to dispose of them. But if you don't have that capacity, you can take them to registered landfill. And the same technique applies to the rhizomes. So if you're going to dig those out, you need to work very carefully to get every last piece out. Allow them to dry out on the ground and then either burn them or take them to a specially registered landfill. But this is a really serious business, and if you fail to dispose of Japanese knotweed correctly, you could be prosecuted, fined, you could even go to prison. Whatever method you choose, it's not an easy road to travel. And knotweed doesn't just pose a threat to your garden. In recent years, mortgage companies have become increasingly wary of lending money on properties that are affected, which means house sales can fall through or be devalued when knotweed is present. So I wanted to meet someone who's gone into battle with this invasive fiend and come out the other side. Alicia Lewis lives in central Cardiff. When she bought her flat 2 years ago, she quickly discovered Japanese knotweed growing in her garden. Gosh, so this is where the beast emerged.
Yeah, it popped up like in that corner over there, and it literally has just been this entire sort of back area. It was almost to the top of the wall there, so.
Wow, okay. And so how many years down the line are you now with treatment?
I've been here for 2 years now, and Iestyn's been looking after it, but he's been looking after it since before even I moved in.
So I guess it's probably a typical 3-4 year cycle to have got it to that point. Yeah.
And now it's only just beginning now that I can actually start planning to have an actual garden. So.
I mean, it looks like it's worked. I'm noticing it alarmingly. It is over the fence there, isn't it? And so there's a chance it could come back through. My advice probably would be to sink a rhizome barrier or something similar, so that could be concrete slabs. So you should be able to prevent it sort of coming back in. It might be big, mean, and green, but Alicia is well on her way to conquering this weed once and for all. So if you have a knotweed problem, there is light at the end of the tunnel. And another glimmer of hope emerged earlier this year. Researchers at the University of Leeds established that Japanese knotweed is not nearly as damaging as previously thought. In fact, they've concluded that although it can exacerbate structural problems, it's no worse than woody plants, such as trees. That said, it's not something you want anywhere near your property. So if you find it in your garden, contact the experts, be prepared for a long battle, but know that you can defeat this garden tyrant.
Knotweed is a monster. And as an organic gardener, it is even more difficult to get rid of. And it can be tempting to resort to chemicals, although by cutting it back, it does weaken it. And in Japan, I know that they are doing trials on biological control, which may be interesting. However, not all weeds are monsters. We have plenty here, and some are more vigorous than others. One of the more pernicious weeds we have here is this. This is oxalis. And it really likes compacted hard soil, so it grows, for example, in amongst the cobbles here. And you can see there are seed heads here, and the seeds are then flung up to 3 foot or more. And it's very hard to control it unless you can keep on top of that. The important thing is to time your work correctly. So, for example, with the oxalis, get it before the seed heads form. As soon as you see the flowers, cut it back. I think another secret about weeding is to do it regularly, little and often. If you think you need to weed, it's too late. But I've got a weed that was here when we came and has remained in the garden for the last 25 years and taken up residence in the jewel garden. By and large, the jewel garden is pretty devoid of weeds, but a weed I've never been able to get rid of is couch grass. Now, couch looks like ordinary grass, and it's very vigorous, it's very tough, and it spreads. Now, if I lift this out here, using a fork to tease it out, I'm going to have to take the off-ear poking out as well. There is a piece of couch, tease that out, and I don't want to break it. That's area. Now, if you can see, there's the grass, and you can see these underground rhizomes and the little hair roots coming off it. But the rhizomes store food, and any part of it can generate a new plant. So if it breaks, and it's very brittle, and snaps off when you dig it up, a new plant will grow from that. Now, obviously, digging any of it up helps. Cutting it back helps. It doesn't get rid of it. To get rid of couch, you do need to systematically take it out, but that should not go in a compost heap. Now, in fact, about 10, 12 years ago, we got a bad infestation of bindweed, and that's the same principle. You need to dig up the roots. They're very brittle, so you've got to be very careful about it. Take every scrap out. You can compost the top, but do not compost the roots. Burn them if you can, bag them up, take them away, and they can be disposed of by a council. And if you keep at it, you can get on top of them. And that way you and weeds can have a sort of steady relationship once you've got the upper hand. Now, this summer, actually, the weeds haven't been too bad. It's been too hot and dry for them. And it's been exceptional. We've all had to adapt to weather that we really haven't been used to. And Adam went along to Wisley to see how they had adapted.
This year we've enjoyed one of the hottest summers on record and seen our gardens bathed in weeks of continuous sunshine. But it's not been all plain sailing for us gardeners. If you're anything like me, at times I struggle to keep things alive in that heat. But think back, before that we were dealing with a beast from the east and that really slow spring. And I've come here today to RHS Wisley to see how they got on with it. I'm meeting Matthew Podges, who is the curator. Matt, nice to see you again, mate. What was I here, 12 months ago?
Was, yeah.
To look at the exotic border, because I remember it, the structure was in there, but I suppose it looked new, put it that way. Was the way
fresh, small, almost bedding-like around them, and it kind of just needed that time to knit together.
And on that point, I can't wait to get in there and have a look, see what this summer has actually done to it.
Let's go see.
Wow. What have you been feeling it?
A very hot summer.
I tell you what, it's blown me away. Do you know, last year you could see everywhere, couldn't you? This year, you're lost.
I know. Now it is like you're in this immersive jungle.
Wow. This is just cannas, aren't they?
Nothing that unusual. It's just Canna indica purpurea. And this very, very full established look is because these have been in overwinter.
And you just left these in?
Yeah, these were very cold. So we went down to -9 here at some points. These were mulched with a shredded bracken, big thick mulch over the top. We're on sandy soil, so of course that helps.
Yeah.
Good drainage is always so key with getting these things through the winter. And then that heat in the early summer just got these back into action again. Here's the amazing sugarcane.
The colour foliage is fantastic. I haven't seen one like this.
And a lovely midrib. And obviously it's been a hot summer and this is towering above us, but you know, even if it was a cooler summer and it was half the size, it's still super impressive.
There's a bit of a wow factor to it, isn't there?
And speaking of surprises, just next door, do you know that? Looking at the label?
Eupatorium?
Eupatorium, yeah. You know, this is really grown for its foliage. I didn't actually think this would be hardy at all, so I said to the team, take lots of cuttings, of course some of it then survives. So it's a bit of an insurance policy, or if you're gardening in quite a cold part of the UK, you know, you could do a tip cutting of this about now, just something about this kind of size, root it, keep it in a cooler glass house, and then bed it out in the spring, and that is just one season's growth on that.
Fantastic, isn't it? No, I think it works really well. Wisley Equinox border has been designed to hit its peak at the spring and then autumn equinox.
Got these big generous groupings of the asters for this late summer colour splash, or actually Symphotrachum, I think I should be saying, not aster.
Do you know what, don't you love a botanist?
Yeah, don't you? Yeah. And I think to a lot of people at home, I'm sure there always will be Michaelmas daisies. And these will just keep going and going, you know, right until the end of October. You see there's loads of buds coming in here.
Yeah.
With these borders, they do have a spring content for the spring equinox. And you can see with some of the peonies, you know, they haven't enjoyed this heat. They're a bit shorter than they would normally be. We'll probably give these a bit of a feed and a bit of a boost late winter, early spring. It'll be fine.
They'll all be back, won't they?
They will. So one thing that's really enjoyed the heat this summer is this dwarf pomegranate, which just weighed down with fruit.
Absolutely incredible.
And in my, you know, some nearly 12 years at Wisley, I've never seen this fruit this heavily. And, you know, Wisley's not a warm garden by any stretch of imagination. In the winter time, it's not unusual to have, you know, -10 and colder. And this hasn't actually died back at all in the years I've been here.
I sometimes think that actually they can cope with the cold as long as they've not got their feet in the wet. So I think me at home, I'd feel safer putting it in a container. You know?
Yeah, and that's all about understanding your soil, isn't it, and the drainage of that. And I think south-facing, west-facing walls here, sunny, dry, hot corner, it's just done so well.
Do you know, I do love wandering around this beautiful old garden, and it's definitely got me thinking today about adding to the array of plants that I've got at home. But there's one thing that I'm going to do next year. I'm going to celebrate all the things that go right and not worry at all about the things that go wrong.
It's tempting to say that Wisley doesn't know what cold is compared to what we have here. But actually, one of the coldest days filming I've ever had in my life was in April at Wisley. So it can be chilly. But the truth is that the weather is changing, and no doubt the way that we treat plants will have to change as well. And this connects with a letter I've had from Mr. Mitchell from Tadworth in Kent. And he says that he has a fig tree that's grown well, covered in figs, but he's not sure when to pick them. How does he know when they're ripe? This is a variety called brown turkey, and the ripe figs turn a lovely chocolatey plum colour, and you feel them and they're a bit soft. But my figs have behaved unusually this year because they've loved the hot weather. They've grown just as they do in the Mediterranean, and they have produced a mass of fruit. There's just one problem. These figs are the second crop. The first crop was very few and far between. I don't suppose we have more than a dozen figs from trees we've got in the garden. And I think what the fig tree has done, it's behaved as though it was in the Mediterranean and put its energy into the crop that would ripen later in the year if we were in a Mediterranean climate. But despite our exceptionally hot summer, winter is going to kick in, and I'm afraid that for you, Mr. Mitchell, and for me and all of us who grow figs, that in a few weeks' time, we're going to have to pick them all off and discard them. Otherwise, they'll take energy from the tree. However, we don't have to do that for a few weeks. But I've got some jobs for you to do right now, this weekend. If you pot up hyacinths now, they should be flowering for Christmas and the new year. Be sure to buy specially prepared bulbs. Use a very free-draining compost and leave the snouts or the pointy ends sticking out into the air. Keep them lightly moist and put them in a dark place for the next few months. And then, when there is a pale shoot about an inch or so long, bring them out into light and heat, and they will flower a few weeks later. Now is a good time to hoe underneath hedges, particularly if they're recently planted. This will mean they'll go into winter weed-free and also leaves the ground clear for planting bulbs. And then when they appear in spring, they won't have any competition. It's not too late to plant out young salad plants like lamb's lettuce or rocket for a winter harvest. And garden centres are selling plants in plugs. The beauty of this is that they can be grown just as easily in a container as they can in the ground. When you've planted them, water them, and be prepared to protect them from frost with fleece or a cloche. It's a shame to see the apples on the ground, but it seems to me that, as well as being very prolific, the apples have better colour than normal this year, and that's true of all fruit. So I love the way that the hips of the Rambling Rose Ethel are beginning to colour up really well. And the Amelanchier below it is taking on its full autumnal hue. So the autumn colour is really kicking in. And Nigel is eating as many apples as possible before I gather them up to juice. But that is it for today. I'll be back here at Longmeadow at 8 o'clock next Friday, so join us then. Bye-bye.